Slavery is back.
Welcome to a place where private business profit from a captive labour force, yet pennies are spent on medical services to a population in which the Indigenous, the poor and the mentally ill are overrepresented. Where isolation, humiliation and degradation are facts of life. Welcome to prison.
It depends who's telling the story, I suppose. The prisoners would have one view, the people who work in the prison system would have another, and I think it's up to people to decide where the truth is.
Give government propaganda and the media spin doctors the flick. And check out Doin' Time for news, views and tunes on prison issues from Guantanamo Bay to Christmas Island to prisons and detention centres everywhere. Every Monday at 4 p.m. on your community radio 3CR.
We are still fired up and we're still talking about revolution.
Hello and welcome to the Doin' Time show. This is 3CR Community Radio, 855 AM on the dial, streaming live on www.3cr.org.au. And a warning that there will be audio images of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples that have died today. It's approximately 4:01 and first up on the show we're going to be speaking with Boe Spearim, who is a First Nations radio host and podcaster. And he's from Queensland, and I'm going to actually ask him to speak about what mobs he's from. And then, we're going to be speaking with Boe about the frontier wars, which refer to conflicts between Europeans and Aboriginal people, including battles, acts of resistance and open massacres from 1788 to the 1930s. And we'll be speaking with him about quite a few warriors and acts of resistance, and we'll speak about that shortly. After that, we're going to be speaking with Josephine Langbien, who's the senior lawyer at the Human Rights Law Centre, and we'll be speaking with her about the depth of Australia's coercive refugees family separation policy, which is revealed in a new report written by the Human Rights Law Centre. But coming up now, we're going to be speaking with Boe about the many, many interviews and research, much research that he has done in regards to the frontier wars, which have not been recorded in history at all and in the books. And a lot of school children, I believe, have been robbed of this history. It's absolutely deplorable that as part of this ongoing genocidal inaction that has been happening with Aboriginal people over the years, that the frontier wars have been deliberately excluded, and there's been so much romanticising of Indigenous people over the years. And now we welcome Boe. Hello, Boe. Welcome to the program.
How you going? Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. Now, first of all, Boe, would you mind just talking about what land you're from?
Yeah, definitely, for sure. So I'm Gamilaraay Kooma and Marawari. Those, like my tribes, are situated northern New South Wales and southern Queensland. I was born on, I believe it's Darug country in Blacktown in Western Sydney, but since I was 7 years old, I've been on Yagara country on the south side of Brisbane, and that's where I reside today as well.
Thank you so much, Boe. Now, I'm wondering if you could just talk about this very, very neglected part of history, isn't it? Can you talk about the frontier wars and what they are, and why is it that they haven't been recognised?
Definitely. So the frontier wars are defined as events occurring, and in particular to Australia, from, I guess, European settlement in 1788 up till the 1930s. These are land battles that were fought between Aboriginal and European settlers in many parts of Australia. So as far south as Tasmania, to as far north as North Queensland, to as far west as, Western Australia, wherever there now today is sort of European or Australian settlement. I dare say that there would have been a conflict between Aboriginal people and European settlers due to the nature of how European settlers have retained the land that they have today.
And one of the things, Boe, that I've been researching at the moment is your podcasts, which have been documenting a lot of the stories that have happened, and that's about truth-telling about a side of Australia that has been left out of the history books. Can you talk about that?
Definitely, for sure. So as I was just mentioning, sort of defining or describing what the Frontier Wars is, and as you mentioned before, many of children of Australia have been sort of robbed of this history, and that's this history that we're talking about, the Frontier Wars. That consists of massacres, battles, triumphs on behalf of Aboriginal people. I'm just at the park with kids, and there's a little airstrip across the road, so you'll hear planes flying over. Sorry.
That's okay.
It's been defined as conflicts between Aboriginal people, which consisted of battles, massacres on all fronts, from Aboriginal people using traditional weapons to Aboriginal people eventually using guns and horses to participate in these different things. It's just been over a year that the podcast has been going as well.
And can you actually give listeners the link so that they can go in and listen for themselves?
Definitely, for sure. So the easiest way is for the listeners to Google Frontier War Stories, and then the first sort of link to come up should be Frontier War Stories, and it should be a link to the streaming platform that I hosted on, the hosting site, which is called Podbean. And through Podbean, people can join and become patrons, and if they enjoy the program or want more, they can donate as much or as little as they like. Or you can also listen to it via Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and all other streaming platforms that host podcasts as well. They're the streaming platforms that I've been using over the last year and a bit.
Can you talk about some of your favourite warriors and discuss some of the historical things that happened?
Definitely. I guess I wouldn't tend to sort of play
not favourite, but you know what I mean. Like warriors that have, they're all good, they're all amazing, but warriors that have particularly that you've related to particularly.
For sure. So, obviously there's the one that stands out in Australian history, which is Pemway. He is sort of seen as one of the first sort of Aboriginal resistance leaders in the early British colony in Sydney. He participated in over a 10-year to 12-year resistance against sort of the British invasion of sort of the wider Sydney area and surrounding area. He was sort of known as the Rainbow Warrior because I believe he sort of represented and sort of had, like the okay from other nations for him to lead them into battle. He was very fierce. He was obviously feared by European soldiers and settlers, and also he was feared by other Aboriginal people as well because of his reputation as well. Where I live in Brisbane, there's Dundalli. Dundalli, he is a Gubba man from the Sunshine Coast. Sort of the same thing. His reputation sort of precedes him. So, one, he is respected and feared by his peers, being Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal. And he held 10-year resistance here in Brisbane. The thing about him was he was the last publicly hung person at the gallows in Brisbane, or the furthest colony from Sydney. So at the time, I believe Brisbane was still a part of the New South Wales colony. And where, the ironic thing is where he was hung and where many people were hung at the gallows, across from that is Anzac Square. So, they have the eternal flame. They also have, monuments and statues and plaques to commemorate the first sort of soldiers who fought who participated in wars with Australia against sort of other nations. It's ironic. And then, on the other side, of that, every year on the 5th of January, we gather to pay respects to Dunderlings. We light a fire. The last couple of years, the Brisbane City Council sort of got behind what the community have been doing, and they sort of put a plaque together and they put it out. Obviously, it's not anything like the plaques or the statues that they have of these like European settlers or of these soldiers who they honour as well. And as I mentioned, they have an eternal flame. We just light a fire, for an hour or two, and then put the fire out as we leave. There's obviously in Victoria two sort of significant figures. There's Tanaminoe and Mulbahina. They held a 7 to 10 week resistance. They're Tasmanian Aboriginal people. They were brought up with, I believe it was 10 to 15 Aboriginal people from Victoria, because one of the reasons why they brought them up is because the Black Wars have just finished in Tasmania, and they were sort of brought up as to show European settlers and also Aboriginal people that we can pacify you, or we can pacify the blacks. So they brought them up, and out of that 10 to 15, 5 of them, Mulbahina, Tanaminoe, I believe, Truganini, and 2 other Aboriginal women, they terrorised sort of greater Melbourne for 7 to 10 weeks as well. I did that interview with Joe Toscano. He's from Victoria, or he's based down there, originally from up Queensland here, from Brisbane.
He lives in Victoria.
He lives in Victoria, but based in Victoria, from Queensland. Yeah. What else is there? There's many stories. A really interesting figure for me would be, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, Wallias. She's an Aboriginal woman from Tasmania. Same thing, she held a resistance for almost a decade. But her story is she was sold as a sex slave to sealers and whalers by other Aboriginal people, to these European men. And while she was there, she learned English, and she learned how to fire muskets. And so once she was comfortable, once she sort of knew what she was doing, she escaped, went back to her people, started a band of warriors, and consisted with her band of warriors to terrorise parts of Tasmania.
And what year was that?
That was, 1 second, I believe that was the 18... it would be around the 1830s earlier. Yeah. Because the Tasmanian Wars are sort of these conflicts that happened over a 30-year period down that way. He's very, very significant, also to myself anyways, because in terms of what she did. And she also represents this sort of history of Aboriginal women in this period of time that we tend to not hear about a lot. And I want to take it upon myself to sort of figure out and find more Aboriginal women who led and participated in frontier violence. I know, and I'm sure, Aboriginal women participated in frontier conflict as well to honour, their loved ones and their family members who were murdered and massacred. So eventually I'm going to just a brief article of some stories and some individual Aboriginal women who participated in frontier conflict, which I'm looking forward to doing as well. I've found a couple of things, and then also I want to do an episode on frontier war stories about it as well. But that's something that I want to take upon myself to sort of look at and research as well, is how significant, how important, because we all know how important Aboriginal women are.
Very important.
Like society is and has played out, they tend to write out, the actions and the triumphs of women, and they, they sort of, tend to put a male face or a white face over sort of these actions, and that's how history has been, or they just sort of wipe that history out, and or they just don't tend to tell it. So like a lot of the history that I'm talking about is recorded by explorers or by the newspapers of the day, and they're from letters of European people who have written to their families back in England, have written to sergeants or the government to say, hey, these individuals are continuing to carry out these massacres, carry out these raids on my property, they're burning my crops and all those other things. Like,
well, it's an eye. It's an eye for an eye, right?
Well, definitely. I wouldn't necessarily call it an eye for an eye. It was more so, an eye for 10 eyes or 20 eyes, or you know what I mean. Like
what I mean.
See,
sorry, Bo. What I mean to say is, it's not about revenge. But,
no.
But it's more what I'm trying. You understand what I'm saying? I get what
you're saying. Sorry, yeah.
It's that you're actually they're perpetrators, right? So they're only acting the way the perpetrators are acting, and they're fighting. And
in relation to how they're acting, definitely, and a lot of because a lot of people I'm speaking to on the podcast are historians, who have trolled through these archives, who have done the hard yards of years looking at, these archives, these books, these journals, these letters, all these different things, and they sort of come up with, this hidden history that tells us the actual correct history of what happened or how it played out, on this continent. One of the things that you can do and really track with this history is that Aboriginal people and massacres weren't really recorded, like the death toll, and in these instances, some of the times when you'd find out about massacres happening, it would be because of some of the soldiers, the settlers, they were drunk, and they were boastfully telling, other people, sometimes drunk soldiers telling, women, or, you have a report where 1 or 2 or 3 officers had died in relation to, defending their lives against a large group of aggressive, dangerous, natives or whatever, savages or, whatever they want to call us. But, it was hardly recorded. And thankfully, we have people like Lindley Wallace, who was tracking Native Mounted Police in Queensland in their camps, and, or we have people like Lyndall Ryan, who was, recording the massacre sites and the maps and how many people with her massacre map. These are the people who are doing the hard work. I'm essentially just, press and record and asking some questions, just sort of capturing what they're doing. Another interesting part that I find amazing, and I want to sort of do some more research into it, is lots of the research I've spoken to, they continue to say that for a period of time there was, coexistence. Aboriginal people did everything that they could in their power to not have conflict. They'd give them parcels of land. They'll bring them into the tribe. Be a part of the tribe. They'll do so much, and then as history has played out, conflict has started due to settlers, occupying and stealing more land, killing Aboriginal people, killing Aboriginal babies or Aboriginal women, poisoning Aboriginal people, carrying out these horrendous, disgusting acts in the eyes of sort of sometimes Aboriginal people or in the eyes of their peers, and what we see, is this sort of horrendous history that
I think I think it's really fantastic that you're talking about all this, and I suppose in listening to you, what I'm saying here is that it's important that people understand that it's not about the revenge side of it. It's about the fact that it's resistance. They're warriors.
It is. Yeah. It is definitely. It's if somebody went into your house and stole something of yours, and you knew it was, you would if it was very significant, you'd want to get that thing back. You'd approach this person, you'd ask them, or you'd go to any means to sort of get that back. that you would if you didn't want to get the cops involved. Aboriginal people did everything they could. And this is sort of something that I want to look at because I believe like Aboriginal governance or and sort of Aboriginal, I don't know if it's a word, like relationality, like the relationships that Aboriginal people have with ourselves, with the country, and then also with settlers as well, is really, really important. And that's something that I really want to sort of delve into in the podcast as well. There's a few sort of Aboriginal academics who sort of are in this area, and sort of Aboriginal people that I want to speak to that are in this area.
So each
episode, sort of look at governance. Sorry?
Yeah. So each episode that you speak with different Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people about research, books, and oral histories.
Yeah.
So, Bo, we're going to have to leave it there, I'm afraid. We're going to be speaking with Josephine about refugees next. She's a lawyer at the Human Rights Law Centre. But just really quickly before we go, though, can you just talk about about Mile Creek? Because the anniversary is coming up in June, isn't it?
Yeah. So, Mile Creek is a very significant sort of massacre site and event, because it's the only time European settlers or Australian settlers, European settlers were convicted, found guilty, had a conviction, found guilty, and then prosecuted and hung for their involvement in a massacre. But you can't mention Mile Creek without mentioning Mile Creek, which happened January 1839. It was a punitive expedition by Major Nunn over a period of several months. And what happened was they were tracking a band of Aboriginal Gamilaraay warriors, I believe it was. And what happened was they couldn't. They eventually found them by a creek and by water, and pursued to sort of massacre a whole lot of Aboriginal people. Now, the thing about Waterloo Creek is the numbers vary from a handful, it's like 5 to 6 to 10, to 20 to 30 to 50, and then up to 100. And some of these numbers have been recorded by some of the people who are the perpetrators, like Major Nunn, and the way that they sort of mention these massacres is by sort of boastfully telling, women while on a sort of drinking spree or while boasting to sort of other settlers, and this is sort of how these things got recorded. One of the reasons why this is sort of important to mention the Mile Creek, because some of the individuals, like partialists who participated in this massacre, they were armed to the teeth. They were taught how to sort of track, how to set up sort of, massacres and all these other things. They trained, they armed settlers, and so what happened was, in this case, they armed settlers to their teeth, gave them horses, and they carried out this massacre. And I believe some of the men involved in that were also involved in Mile Creek as well. And the thing to mention, if there's multiple massacres in one area or close by, it's usually done and perpetrated by the same people.
Yeah. Bo, thank you so much for coming onto the program. And what date is that? Because there's usually a memorial, isn't there, every year? That's in June, isn't it?
In June, yes. Yeah. Well, the good thing about it is because of COVID last year, there's lots of memorial sites around the country that didn't get to do theirs physically. It all went virtual. So in June, and then there's a date in the Darling Downs area here in Queensland, it's Womba, and that's to commemorate one of the first losses that the Queensland or one of the New South Wales colonies took in relation to Aboriginal resistance. That's Multugger and the Battle of One Tree Hill. That's an episode of Frontier War Stories. That comes up in November, I believe it is. So
that's great.
To get to that as well.
I mean, it's not great about the massacres, but it's great that you're actually doing all these podcasts. Bo, thank you so much for coming onto the program, and we'll talk more about the date of Mile Creek very soon. I'm hoping you can come back as a regular guest. I hope you enjoyed the interview.
No, it was great. It was great. Thank you, and I hope your listeners enjoyed it.
I'm sure they will. I'm sure they'll learn a lot. Thanks so much, Bo, and we'll talk soon.
Definitely. Thanks, Pat. Bye.
Bye. And that was Boe Spearim, First Nations radio host and podcaster, speaking about the Frontier Wars. And next up, we're going to be speaking with senior lawyer at the Human Rights Law Centre, Josephine Langbien. I'm just going to go into a quick announcement.
I really am not understanding why people aren't seeing the fact that prisons are an integral part of a public health response to a pandemic. Like you, I'm really concerned about whether the data is being released very honestly about illnesses within prison. I have suspicions it's not, but really we need very strong leadership in this country that actually cares about people inside our most vulnerable populations inside. That's what we need, and that's not what we're getting right now.
We need to keep radical voices on air. Subscribe now.
Go to 3cr.org.au/subscribe or call the station on 9419 8377.
And you're back with the Doing Time show, and we're going to be speaking about a very, very important topic here. The Australian government has engaged in a strategic, deliberate and coercive campaign to separate refugees from their families and prevent them from reuniting in Australia. And the Human Rights Law Centre has written a new report, and we're going to be speaking with senior lawyer from the Human Rights Law Centre, Josephine Langbien, about this report. And it's basically a landmark multidisciplinary report that exposes the Australian government's deliberate use of family separation to punish and deter refugees seeking safety in Australia. Hello, Josephine. Welcome to the program.
Good afternoon, Marisa. Thanks for having me.
It's lovely to have you, and thank you for your patience. Now, I'm wondering if you could just talk about you're a senior lawyer, obviously, at the Human Rights Law Centre, but could you talk about the report and how the centre made that decision to actually write it, and a bit about the background?
Absolutely. Now, I think you summed up the report really well. It is intended to really expose the way the Australian government is intentionally keeping refugees away from their families. I think during the COVID-19 pandemic, we all experienced how hard it can be to be separated from our loved ones.
Yeah.
And that separation is really painful. But for thousands of people in Australia who are refugees, that's been their reality for years. And so the intention of this report is really to tell the stories of the families who have been living with this reality, people who have been living in the Australian community for years but have no prospect of reuniting with their loved ones. And so the report really draws on those stories of the families themselves, but also expert medical and legal analysis to show that this kind of separation, the kind of policies that the Australian government is implementing are not only wrong, but they are really harmful to the health and mental health of the people who are experiencing them, and they're also illegal under international law.
Indeed, it is illegal, and it's still happening. Why is that?
That is an excellent question. These policies have been going on for a really long time, but I think part of the issue is that many Australians are simply unaware that this is happening. When Donald Trump was tearing children from their families at the US-Mexico border, there was international outcry. But the Australian government has managed to get away with perpetrating this kind of harm on a systematic scale for years. These policies are in contravention of a number of international human rights treaties, and those are agreements that the Australian government has voluntarily signed up to and agreed to be part of and to protect and defend those human rights standards, but is now acting in contravention of those human rights treaties.
So the report is called Together in Safety, and I've been reading the report. It's very disturbing, and there's a lot of really tragic stories. Could you just talk about some of those?
Yeah, the families that that we worked with to prepare this report were incredibly courageous and generous in sharing their stories with us. But we're talking about, mothers who are having to explain to their young child why her father and her siblings can't be with them in Australia because they're still stuck in a refugee camp overseas. And we also heard from a man who had to endure years of detention on Manus Island while the rest of his family managed to resettle in Australia and rebuild their lives, but he couldn't be there with them simply because he arrived in Australia on a different date to him, to the rest of his family. So a different policy applied to him. And, we heard a really tragic story about a father who is just so desperate to bring his children to safety in Australia now after their mother really devastatingly passed away while she was waiting for a visa to Australia. But all of these people are separated by different laws and policies that are designed to keep people away from their families. But the end result for all of these families is the same. People are left with this really unthinkable choice between their safety or being with the people they love.
So the report finds that the Australian government has used three main methods to keep families apart. Can you talk about those?
Yes, so there's a range of laws and policies that are used to shut refugees out of family reunion pathways. The first is people who are on temporary protection visas are completely ineligible to even apply to bring their family members to Australia. And then secondly, people who are eligible to apply, so people who have permanent protection visas, if they arrive by boat in Australia, they are constantly sent to the back of the visa processing queue. So in effect, their family visa applications are just never considered because new applications are lodged all the time. So there's the complete barring of any form of application for some people. There's the constant deprioritisation of applications for other people. And then in our offshore detention centres too, we've seen people who've been separated from family members who were already settled in Australia, or we've seen people who are forced to leave loved ones behind in Nauru or Papua New Guinea during urgent medical evacuations to Australia.
It's absolutely appalling to hear that, given that prior to the Liberal government coming in, although Labor might have had something to do with this too, probably happens on both sides of politics, that there was a boat policy that was created, wasn't it? Because this didn't happen during the Howard regime, did it? Where people coming on boats were discriminated against like this. That shouldn't be allowed.
You're right. A lot of these policies are really rooted in the really toxic rhetoric that has developed around people who travel by boat, sort of over the last decade, really. And so that's essentially why these policies exist. They're targeted to punish people for how and when they arrived in Australia, and to try and deter other people from seeking protection here. And that deterrence aim is how the government justifies these policies, regardless of the fact that we're talking about people who have been part of our community for years and years, who arrived before these policies were even introduced. And I mean, in our view, it's never justifiable to use the love that that family members have for each other as a form of punishment.
Yeah, and of particular concern, and I'm just having a look at the media release here, is that it's separation by endless deprioritisation, as you said, of certain family reunion applications, and that effectively denies permanent residents who arrive by boat the prospect of ever being approved to reunite with their family in Australia. Is that right?
That's right. So there's a particular government policy. It's called Ministerial Direction 80, which is a rule that the government has made for the Department of Home Affairs when they're processing visa applications. And it says you have to decide visa applications in a certain order of priority. And if you are a person who arrived by boat and you want to bring your family members here, you are forever at the back of that visa processing queue. And so because every year there are more people applying to bring their family members to Australia than there are visas available, it means that those applications are just never processed. So we're working with people who have been waiting 7 years and counting for their partner or child visas to be approved, and that's from the time that policy was introduced. And there's just no end in sight for these people. There is an exception to this policy if people can make out what are described as compelling and compassionate circumstances. There is supposedly an exemption to being put at the back of the queue, but that test is so broad and vague, and the kind of circumstances that people are required to demonstrate to be awarded that exemption are, for many people, have just been impossible to achieve. And so people are just waiting indefinitely.
So in Together in Safety, 5 refugee families who've been deliberately kept apart tell their story. So I'm wondering, would you mind, Josephine, giving us the link for the report?
For the report, yes, absolutely. So people can head to the Human Rights Law Centre's website at hlc.org.au, and the report is there on the homepage. You can download that report and read the stories that these families have told in their own words. And as you mentioned, these are 5 families who have experienced years of separation for different through different methods. Some because of offshore detention, some because of temporary protection visas, some because they are endlessly deprioritised under Ministerial Direction 80. And those families describe the impact that that's had on their lives and the things that they have missed out on, those everyday moments that make being with your family so important, watching your kids grow up, seeing their first steps and hearing their first words, or being a parent trying to raise teenagers and guide them through life. So these are the sorts of things that these families are missing out on.
And it's interesting, I really liked the way you made the analogy with the COVID-19 last year and how people were separated from their loved ones during COVID-19, the lockdown. Except that this is actually not lockdown, this is far worse, isn't it?
Well, exactly. And, it's I think it's hard for everyone to not be able to be with their loved ones, and people, we've all missed out on some really important things, special family occasions or looking after loved ones who are sick. These are all awful things to have to miss. But for people who are impacted by these policies, the pandemic was really just another hurdle in what has already been years of just not knowing when they'll be able to share another birthday or even unfortunately sometimes being able to grieve the loss of a family member with their other loved ones.
And thank you for that. And a lot of the listeners also need to understand, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that the Together in Safety report details the views of internationally renowned barristers, doesn't it, and medical professionals. Can you talk about that?
Yes, absolutely. So the report includes some expert analysis from doctors who have worked with children and families, people who are refugees and people who have been separated from their loved ones by the government policies. And these doctors describe the kinds of impacts that can have on both children and adults in terms of their mental health and their long-term well-being, and in the case of kids, their development. And those doctors found that this sort of harm has a really a lifelong impact on people. And the barristers that we spoke to analysed these policies and that kind of harm against international human rights standards, and found that the Australian government's policies are in breach of things like the right to have a family and the right to family life, the rights of the child, but also because that harm to some families is so serious and long-lasting, it can, in some circumstances, reach the threshold of the sort of pain and suffering that we talk about when we talk about torture. And the fact that these policies are being implemented for punitive reasons, and because they're being carried out by the government, those elements combined mean that in some cases the Australian government may be in breach of the Convention Against Torture.
It's definitely illegal under international law, and unfortunately, you know, this separation of refugee families is intentional.
That's right, and the government is completely upfront about that. They've acknowledged several times that these policies are designed to disincentivise people coming to Australia to seek protection by boat. So these are targeted, intentional policies that are designed to punish people and are also definitely experienced as punitive by the people who are subject to them.
Josephine, I was particularly moved by an incident that was talked about in the report, and I believe I also recorded a rally about this when he first passed away, and that was Faisal Imak, I think.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What a dreadful thing. A Sudanese refugee dies from head injuries he suffered during a seizure despite asking for medical help for his chest pains and frequent seizures more than 20 times in the previous 6 months. And I suppose what I wanted to ask you is, how could that happen? And it's so important to actually document some of the medical atrocities and violation of human rights that have happened in not only at Manus Island and Nauru, but in detention centres across Australia.
Absolutely. And I think we've seen a really devastating amount of evidence coming out from our offshore detention centres in recent years that really exposed the medical crisis that was and is occurring there. Now, you spoke about an incident that is referred to in the foreword to our report, which Behrouz Bouchani contributed to the report, and he describes his friend Faisal, who passed away in the circumstances that you described, and he left behind a letter addressed to a friend who was also on Manus Island, and in that letter Faisal asked his friend to do everything in his power to help rescue his children from the refugee camps at Sudan's border if he were to pass away. And so, you know, the people who suffered through Australia's offshore processing regime, you know, that is torturous enough in itself. And then for people who have the added distress of knowing that their family members remain behind in incredibly dangerous situations and they're powerless to help them and look after them, including their own children. You know, that is just it's hard to fathom.
It's systemic racism and systemic abuse, and what this really highlights here, correct me if I'm wrong, is that this system deprives ill refugees of access to basic medical care in order to pressure them into returning to where they fled from. And I quote directly from the report, Together in Safety.
Yes. So one of the practices that we did see the Australian government implementing was, when people were on Nauru or Manus Island, and the conditions of their detention had led to a deterioration in their health to the point that they needed urgent evacuation to Australia because there simply weren't the facilities to provide the care that they needed in those places. People were prevented from bringing their family members with them. So a number of women who fell pregnant on Nauru and needed to be transferred to Australia to give birth were actually not allowed to bring their partners with them. And so those women then came to Australia and had to give birth alone and spent years raising their children without any family support in a new place. And then the fathers of these children didn't manage to meet their babies for years. And part of the reason for this, and the government acknowledged this at the time, was that they thought that if the whole family unit was not in Australia, then people would be more inclined to return to offshore detention locations after the birth. And so in that way, we see family separation being used as a way to pressure and coerce people into doing what the government wants them to do.
And of course, we can't forget the Tamil family in all this.
Absolutely. I think the family from Billawila who are held on Christmas Island are such a clear example of the kind of unnecessary cruelty that the government is capable of in the name of these policies of deterrence. But I think what the Billawila family also shows us is that when the Australian public is aware of what's going on, and they can see a face and a name and the impact on a family, people don't support it. People don't understand why it's happening. They don't agree with these kinds of extreme punishments. And I think that's what we're really hoping the Together in Safety report can do, is to show the Australian public, the families who are impacted by these policies of separation, to put a human face on those stories and help people understand that this sort of cruelty is completely unnecessary and completely unacceptable.
And so, of course, we need to uphold our democratic right to protest in the streets, and also people who don't wish to protest need to write letters to their politicians.
Absolutely, and we'd really encourage people to read the Together in Safety report and to listen to the first-hand testimony from the families who are impacted. And as I said, you can head to the Human Rights Law Centre website to read about other ways that you can take action as well.
Josephine, thank you so much for coming onto the program. You've given a really detailed analysis of the report, and it's a very, very useful tool that the Human Rights Law Centre has implemented. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. And that was Josephine Langbien, who is the senior lawyer at the Human Rights Law Centre. And the Human Rights Law Centre has done a lot of work in regards to many, many campaigns, and this report is just one of them. It's approximately 4:49, and I'm going to be playing a song now called We Have Survived by No Fixed Address.
You can't break my bone by I can see what's going on in my mind, 'cause we have survived the white man's way and the heart and the torment of it all. We have survived the white man's way, and you know you can't change that.
We've got a common enemy. The same government that locks up these refugees just behind us here at the Park Hotel is the same government that's going for our rights, trying to attack the very limited gains that casuals have. And so when union activists take up the cause of refugees amongst their fellow workers, it's not an act of charity. It's about building workers' united self-defence mechanism, understanding that we're all part of the same battle.
Subscribe to 3CR in 2021. Feed Radical Radio. Subscribe today. Go to 3cr.org.au/subscribe or call the station on 94198377.
What we're dealing with here is a total lack of respect for the law.
Tune in to Done by Law.
An informal and irreverent look at the law. Critical insights and analysis from diverse community perspectives.
Done by Law, 6 p.m. Tuesdays.
And we're just nearing the end of our show. This is the Doing Time show. It's approximately 4:54, and we've got a climate change show up next. I have to find out the name of it. Anyway, we're nearing the end of our show. Thank you to Boe for coming on, and also to Josephine from the Human Rights Law Centre. And we're hoping to bring you some more coverage next week. Not too much to say right now because there's very little information, but I was watching NITV last night and I believe there's been a couple more deaths in custody. So we'll be bringing you coverage about that in the upcoming weeks. And of course, Radiothon is coming up as well for the station. And our show is actually on the 14th of June. So we will need donations for that. Our target is $850. So donate to all shows at 3CR. And it's goodbye from Marisa, and we'll be going out with our theme song, Black Fella, White Fella by the Rumpy Band. And stay tuned every Monday for the Doin' Time show from 4 to 5 p.m. Take care of each other and stay safe.
You've been listening to a 3CR podcast produced in the studios of independent community radio station 3CR in Melbourne, Australia. For more information, go to allthews.3cr.org.au.